This is Shadowdark Campaign Diary number 7. This was the rain session in more ways than one. Not only has it been raining here where I live for like 10 days, 2 weeks, almost straight. We have like storms every day. It was ridiculous last week. A bunch of people lost power. We lost power here for like 36 hours. It's sunny right now, but it was just storming like 2 hours ago, and it's going to start storming again in like another hour or two. So, capitalizing on some decent lighting right now to record this video. And rain also featured heavily in our session. All right, so let's get to it. And I think this one I'm just going to do one video. I'm not going to do what I did last time where I did one video that was like narrative and then the other one that was behind the scenes GM stuff. I think there's less going on this time in my own thinking than there was last time. You know, that's like divergent from what actually happened. So, last session we had left off in what I described as a very dangerous situation. The players had gone into the Wavestone Monolith, as it's called, which is also the name of the actual adventure itself from Arcane Library, the creators of Shadowdark. They had just woken up, disturbed one of the creatures, the orcs in here, that are undergoing their transformations, forced transformations into these terrible, nautiloid, shell-like creatures, crab people, as my as my players came to call them this session. That's a name that stuck. The crab people. They had just disturbed one of them, which had created a large noise. This thing woke up screaming, howling in terror, which was, the howls that had been heard coming from this location. And the stone wall behind them was sliding open as a secret door, unbeknownst to them, opened behind them, and all the crab people from the room they had previously scouted came pouring in. This fight went very badly, like pretty quickly. So they the fight started. They rolled pretty decently for initiative, so they went like fairly high in the order. There was 10 of these crab people total. And at the end of the round, like 6 of them were all clumped together, going last after any of the characters. So that gives you an idea of where the characters were, where the party was, like in initiative order. They were, of the 12 total combatants, all of the party went, the 14 total combatants, all of the party went in the first, 8 things to go. I did roll initiative individually for all of the creatures, which is something I would not have done unless I could have done it before the session. Since this was a fight starting the session, that's why I did that. Normally I do not do that. If there's this many creatures, I group them together and they act in little bunches, because otherwise it's just a fucking nightmare. So on the first round, I think really two things. One thing that kind of sealed their fate. The first thing, which they acknowledged afterwards, which I was happy about, that kind of sealed their fate, was they didn't really position themselves. Like, they could have retreated out of this room. They had the space and the time. They could have retreated out of this room and, positioned themselves in the stairwell and the hallway, leading to this room, so they could have been more strategic, more tactical. They didn't do that. And then the second thing that, which wasn't their fault. The second thing wasn't their fault. First thing was their fault. Second thing that went against them was that our frontliner, Gritst, he was one space shy of being able to block the doorway that these things were coming in through. we when we do combat, if it's big, like a bigger combat like this one in Shadowdark, we still use like a grid. Shadowdark has all the abstract distances and everything. But since all the abstract distances, directly convert to the distances that we're used to from tactical combat in 5e, we still just use a grid and like square by square movement when the combat is chunky enough to warrant it. We do. If it's a smaller combat, we just go theater of the mind. But in combats like this, we still use a grid and we move around tactically and square by square. I think it just makes things easier. Like, I know that abstract distances in Shadowdark are meant to like speed things up and cut down on a lot of discussion, but I think, funnily enough, a lot of times it can have the opposite effect, where like the players are just kind of like confused and they're like, "Well, what near distance? Like, okay, this thing is near from me. Is it far from me? So like, I want to move to this spot. Then can I do this? And then can I move further? I don't know how that all breaks up. I think just like a lot of questions do come up that ironically slow things down instead of speeding them up. So when we just use a grid and square movement, it's something we're all used to and we can just do it quickly. So the priest was one square shy of being able to block the door. So these things were able to like pretty freely flood into the room. The bard, Tamra, got up. She's basically like the other frontliner because she has high HP. She just rolled well on her HP. And not good armor class, but high HP. So she got up there with Gritst. The bard made their fascinate check, which they hit after using a luck to reroll. So fascinated the creatures. And I ruled it as, since she's standing there and like it's a focus spell, she's continuing to do it. I ruled it as any creatures that come into the range of effect are also affected. Like, that just makes sense to me and to the players. We had a little discussion about it and we agreed that that's what makes sense. So as they came into the room, I ruled it as like, they get into like the radius of the effect, they move like a little bit and then they're like slowly stopped. Like, they don't stop rigidly like immediately upon entering it. They get like a little bit of movement and then they kind of like slow and stop. So they would move like 5 to 10 feet into the room and then fall prey to the Bard Fascinate effect. So they kind of crowd into the room as much as they can get in there, and then they succumb to the effect. Now, I had also rolled initiative for the Brain Eater, aka the Mind Flayer, that's in this place. Because like I said last video, it's just kind of ridiculous to me that this thing wouldn't know that there was a fight breaking out in its relatively small layer, I mean, it's a fucking Mind Flayer. It has psionic abilities. I think even just a regular person with ears would know that something was going on. So, plausibility demands that the Brain Eater becomes aware of and investigates this fight. So on its first initiative, I described to the players that they can like feel something, like they can feel a psionic presence, like awakening, and they kind of get like a sense of like directionally where it is. One of the things I described was like they have a sense in their minds of like a pair of malevolent purple eyes opening in the darkness, and that it, begins to like move towards them, come closer to them. In my head, they had 3 rounds. I think the layout of the dungeon also, like, I think it makes sense that it would take about 3 rounds for this thing to get over there. So from a gameplay standpoint and from a plausibility standpoint, my 1-2 checklist, it makes sense. It checks off. Because, they need, like I said, they need some kind of indication that this already deadly encounter is going to get even deadlier. Yeah, and like I told them beforehand, like, be very careful where you use your luck. Remember the abilities you have from like your magic items, stuff like that. Um, just to telegraph to them in multiple ways that like, hey, shit's getting real here. The Brain Eater never even needed to enter the equation for this thing to go completely south. Mostly because on the next round for the Bard, she failed the Fascinate check, and they didn't use luck again to re-roll it. Partially because, they wanted to save their luck. They knew like the big bad was coming. And then I think secondly because the Bard wasn't going to lose the ability to cast Fascinate. You only lose the ability to do it if you fail on the actual like spell casting check. And she was just failing the focus check. So they knew that, okay, she fails it this round, but next round she can try it again because she didn't lose it. So I think that also factored into them letting it go. But man, one round was all it took. These things just rolled well on their attack rolls. Gritz, the Goblin Priest, my buddy's character, he has, with Shield of Faith going, he has an 18 AC, which is it's extremely high. These things only have a +2 to hit. 4 attacks came at Gritz on the next round. 2 of them hit. They just rolled well. And D10 damage for each hit with their battle axes. And Gritz has not rolled great on his HP rolls. And he's missing 1 permanent HP from his lingering wound that he took. So I think he only has like 10 or 11 HP. They hit him twice. I think they dealt like 14 damage to him. So he just goes down on like the second round of combat, I think. And then only 1 hit got landed on the Bard. I believe it was only 1 hit, but it was a critical. So she had 1 HP left, I think. And with them seeing how this fight was going, like the discussion pretty quickly came up between the players above board. Like, oh, I think this fight is lost. Like, what do we do? What do we do here? And the decision came pretty quickly to just like run, which like, yeah, I mean, what else are you going to do, honestly? There were maybe some options. I mean, Gritz just forgot, which like I forgot to remind him too. I know this thing is there, but he has the Wraith Chain from the Shadowdark core book that lets you ignore a hit once per day. So he shouldn't have even gone down. If he had remembered it, or I remembered to remind him. But neither of us remembered. So he didn't use it. He went down. Gobbo, my wife's Goblin Thief character, also had the amber chunk full of rubies that can summon dragonflies that they got from the Cursed Abbey of the Dragonfly Horde, I think is the name of the adventure. The one with the Croak folk and the weird dragonfly cult and the Avatar thing. Now, my wife said she remembered that she had this, but she was saving it for when the thing, when the big bad came, which is reasonable, Either of those 2 character abilities would have altered how this fight went. But there were a lot of things that, could or would have altered how this fight went. And like they just all, whether it was the players forgetting or not using the things or not taking advantage of like tactically the options they had to them, everything just kind of went against them here. So when it came to Calliope, who is the elf ranger, when it came to her turn, the NPC, they were looking at me because it's a It's an NPC. It's not one of their characters. They were looking at me as sort of like, okay, what does she do? And this always puts me in a sort of tough spot because I don't want these NPC. Like I've said before, they're not the player characters, so they're not just going to do whatever the player characters want. They're not going to make like ridiculous decisions that the character would never make. But at the same time, I don't want to like make them. I don't want to be like fucking annoying. Like, oh no, they're not going to do that. They're not going to attack that person. They wouldn't do that. Like, I don't want to be too anal about that sort of thing. But this is one of the situations I think it was warranted for them to ask me and for me to make the decision on what this NPC would do. I had to think like fairly hard about it. There was a good amount of discussion surrounding this. And what I decided to do was have her make a morale check. And if she failed it, she probably would have just booked it out of there, like self-instinct kicking in as she's watching her companions get overwhelmed by this horde of fucking crab people. So we rolled a morale check, and she rolled a natural 20. So, this put me in another little improv bind here. What do we do? What do we do with that 20? Because as discussed before, natural 1s, natural 20s always mean something. And in this case, again, my 1-2 checklist of what is good for gameplay and what makes sense plausibly. It's a morale check, and she had a critical success. So, to me, that indicates some kind of rallying effect. Like, she rallies the rest of the party, And I'm just thinking in my head of like, okay, what do rally effects in like video games generally look like? And usually, maybe not usually, but like a lot of times it's like, oh, everybody heals for a little bit, or everybody gets a little bit of like temporary HP or something like that, and maybe some other like minor effect that goes with that. Now, in my head, I'm like, well, Grits is down. One of the other party members is down, and she just rolled a nat 20 on morale, which I interpret as basically a rally effect. I think that would raise the character back up, like maybe heal for like 1 HP and bring them back up. Now that feels like a little too lenient, you know what I mean? It feels like, oh, I'm sort of like reaching in like the hand of God as the DM and like saving a character, which is certainly not how Shadowdark is like supposed to be. But at the same time, it is what it is. It's a natural 20 on a morale check. It should mean something. So what does it mean? And I think logically that makes sense. And what made me feel good about the decision and what encouraged me to make the decision was that my players kind of came to the same conclusion at the same time as me. They were like I think they said it first. Like, oh, well, Grits probably comes back up then, right? And my buddy saying that, I think he said it, or he like was indicating through his body language that he agreed with that assessment. And he's sort of like, he's more hardcore. Like, I almost get the sense that he like wants to die sometimes. Maybe he literally does want to die because he doesn't like his character that much. But he does not like punches getting pulled. He does not like feeling like the GM or the DM is like reaching in there and keeping people alive. He doesn't like that at all. I don't like that either as a player. So the fact that he would like suggest that outcome or agree with that outcome reinforces me feeling okay with it and not feeling like I'm being too lenient. So the way it all played out was that Calliope hit her nat 20 on her morale check. She rallies the party. She yells like, let's get out of here. Grits, get up. Like that sort of thing. Grits comes back up. Now, the way everything was working out at this point with the initiative order was that there was going to be one more attack on Grits and one more attack on Tamra, the Bard, as the frontliners before like everybody could extract themselves safely. Because they had killed 2 out of the 4 enemies that went with and between the party in initiative order. So there were only 2 enemies mixed up in between the 4 party members in initiative order. And so 1 attack each. on Tamra and Gritz. The first attack went against Tamra. So Calliope and Gabo, the thief, both retreat out of the room. They don't use their full, like they don't dash. They both retreated and fired. This became super relevant. I think they each took out an enemy on both of those attacks. No, Calliope missed hers. She missed hers. And then one enemy went and hit Tamra, took her down, because she only had 1 HP left, so she's down now as the party's retreating. Then Gabo went, and Gabo killed, with his crossbow, the other enemy that was about to go. That was right up on Gritz. So Gabo may have saved Gritz's life there. So he was able to get away safely. There was no more attack on him because Gabo killed it. And they book it out of there. I switched to like narrative description here instead of going, like turn by turn. Oh, you move and dash, and then they move and dash after you, and nobody catches anybody. Fuck that. We just go narrative when it gets like that. So they book it out of there. It's another like cinematic moment. They come running out, sprinting, and luckily because they have to move through a lot of like narrow corridors, it compresses the crab people chasing them, doesn't let them kind of like swarm up around them or anything. They come running all the way back out, up the stairs, through the entrance, down the stairs on the outside to where their raft had been like beached on the stairs at the bottom. They all pile onto the raft, shove off as quickly as possible, paddle their little hearts out. And I described the crab people as, despite the fact that they're like semi-nautical at this point, I described them as like, they're just, they're so stupid by this like transformation. Like they've been so like mentally degraded by this process that they've undergone that they like try to carry their weapon, so they're like trying to like keep their weapon and like swim with one arm, stuff like that. This is another of my 1-2 checklist. Run from a gameplay standpoint. The party needs to be able to get away, and these things need to be able to not catch them. Unless we want to just TPK, which I don't, and at least one of my players doesn't. And then number 2, seems plausible, makes sense to me. Fight me. They're dumb. They're really stupid. They're being, like, degraded mentally as they're changed into something else. They want to hold on to their weapons. And they try to swim while doing this, and they're too stupid to realize that, hey, if I need to swim, I need to drop my weapon. So the party makes it out. They paddle out, get back to the edge of this little lake, small lake, large pool, and back into the Bob Ross painting that is this little like mountain, not deciduous, evergreen, like forest valley that they're in. I described like this sky being orange with the last light of the setting sun as it goes down over the mountains. They check again around them, like okay, we need to make camp. Where is it safe to make camp? They know that there's still the orc party on the road looking for them. So they check again around like the whole lake area, and I'm like, yeah, no, like there's no tracks or anything. And I think my wife mentions like, oh, yeah, the orcs probably don't come over here. And no wonder they don't come over here, which made me happy. I'm like, yes, you're piecing together like the bigger picture of like the environment I'm trying to describe, and like the dynamic that's going on out here in the wilds, how all these different like layers, creatures, factions interact with each other. So they gain some distance from the lake. They make camp for the night. Encounter checks are fine. Nothing happens. Oh yeah, one other little sidebar. The way I started off this session was by giving them 10 XP for the wish that Grits got from the like tentacled statue thing that he dumped all the gold in there and got the wish for. Now, this is another thing, like, it felt kind of ridiculous to just give them 10 XP, but straight out of the Shadowdark core book, in examples for XP, it talks about things besides treasure that you get XP for, which there are several things besides treasure that you get XP for. And one of them is like, creative thinking, oaths, rewards, like boons, stuff like that. So, and then under the 10 XP section, it lists 3 things, and one of them is a genie's wish. What am I supposed to do? They literally received a wish spell. And listed under 10 XP is a genie's wish. So I gave them 10 XP for that. They certainly deserve something. I kind of just forgot to give it to them or didn't think about it, didn't know. Or I've read that before, but it just wasn't on my mind. So I forgot to give them anything last time, and they should get something for it. The only question is whether it should be 10 XP, but again, just going by the book. That's what it says. So they camped by the lake. Next morning, it's bad weather, rainy, overcast. Again, I use the new weather system that she released in the Western Reaches Player's Guide, which is just rolling a d6 every day. And the lower the result, the worse the weather is. I roll twice a day. I roll in the morning and then later. I think it makes sense to have like kind of 12-hour increments, and that way you can describe like the weather progressing in a little bit more of fine detail. So, as they're wrapping up their breakfast, they're finishing up camp in the morning in the drizzly, overcast weather. I described them hearing a rolling big drum in the distance to the north. And it rolls out a quick cadence, like dun 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 dun, dun, for maybe like 15 seconds. And then 4 slower boom, 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 boom at the end of it. Which in my head, and I think they picked up on this immediately, the quick drumming at the beginning is to get everybody's attention, whoever was hearing the drum, like, hey, listen. And then at the end is, here's the command. And we bang slowly, however many times, like the command is. So I asked them how they want to proceed, what they want to do. And they wanted to go back to the road and just be very cautious on the road. So, and I guess what they didn't know, this was the orc keep, like the wooden keep to the north that they had encountered. This was them calling back the party of orcs that they had hidden from, the large party with the ogre. Calling them back, or at least a portion of them back. So, my players are approaching the road. They notice, they hear sound, because they're coming up to the road like pretty shortly after this signal was given on the drum. And they can hear a party of something approaching, coming down the road. And they figure, and it is, the orcs coming back. So they position themselves. They get like 20 feet off the road in the trees and covering, and are just watching. And it's the orcs coming back, and now it's a portion of the party. It's not the whole party. It's about half of them. Half of what they'd seen before. The ogre is not there, and there's about 10 orcs. So, it occurs to them that, hey, we could maybe ambush them here. And after sort of going back and forth with each other, they turn to Calliope, a.k.a. me as the GM. And they're like, what does she think? Like, how's she looking? And I described Calliope as like being like pretty upset, like kind of torn up a little bit about, you know, losing the bard Tamra, leaving her in that place, going down to the crab people. And I figured, how would she react? I could see her either being, the classic sort of like revenge or just like sad. So I rolled a die, 50-50, and it came up revenge. So I described her as looking like staring hatred at these orcs, white knuckle gripping her bow, looking like she's just like ready, like tensed to pounce. So that was the deciding factor for them. They said, oh, okay, she wants to fight. Let's fight then. So they ambush the orcs. I give them surprise. I described the orcs as jogging back, not sprinting as quickly as like they had seen them coming previously, because at that time they were being sent out to investigate, to find whatever was causing the sound of battle. Whereas this time they're just being called back, so not as urgent. So they're sort of jogging. The players wait till the line has like largely gone past them, and then they attack the back of the line. And Gabo used the Dragonfly Ruby from the Amber, that magic item this time. So that as part of Gabo did a sneak attack on the first round, and then on the second round summoned the Dragonfly. So between the surprise round, sneak attack, and then the Dragonfly, which the Dragonfly is like badass. It attacks twice per round. It moves double near, and it does like a D8 with each attack. So like it's sick. They just tore these orcs up, dude. Like by close to the top of the initiative order in the second round, they had already killed half these orcs. And the way I was ruling it basically was like, this was too fast for the orcs to even like get their battle rage underneath them, like they literally have an ability in their stat block that makes them immune to morale. But it just all happened so quickly that I'd made a morale check for them like normal, and they failed it, so they broke. Went sprinting off to the north on the road as quickly as they could. The characters chased down and killed the like the sergeant. Like one of the ones was wearing like skulls on his like head and his shoulder pads. One of the leader types. So they killed him, and then they killed 5 other orcs. Harvested all their ears for the bounty, and then continued like cautiously down the road. They were guessing that I think they were mostly thinking that these orcs had gotten into a fight with something, and that's why their numbers were reduced. But I do think they intuited, and they may have mentioned out loud at some point, that maybe they just left a portion of the party down the road, to continue looking for us or whatever. So they were still continuing, they were scouting and everything. They thought about pushing, but they did not. So they're scouting ahead, being cautious on the road. They come up out of this like sort of wooded valley that the road runs through, and they go back up into like the more like confined, narrow, like canyon, very rocky, mountainous, hilly terrain. So as the road narrows back down into more of choke points, Grits, who is scouting ahead on the road, notices a party up off the road to the side on like a cliff face, basically, on like a ledge above the road, about 50 feet above the road, to the road side. And I describe one of the figures as big figure, like way bigger than a humanoid, undoubtedly not humanoid, and then like a smaller figure next to it that was like humanoid sized. So this is the ogre and one of the orcs. that Grits could see up on this ledge off to the side of the road. So Grits goes back, and what they're doing is they're waiting there. They had been stationed there in this choke point coming back out of this valley to catch whatever party had killed the other orcs, to catch them on their way out. So they're waiting there to do that. There's a discussion amongst the party about what to do. I had described it as like it's kind of like a rock wall. Like it'd be like rock wall climbing to get up to these orcs on this ledge. If they had gone around, like that's how you get up there. Like you go further down the path, and then you can sort of it slopes steeply up the back, and you can make it up that way easier than actually climbing. That's how the orcs had got up there. But they figured this would, they kind of ruled out like just attacking them like normally, like trying to just go down the path and climb up or whatever, which is good because that would have been crazy. They thought about maybe. They asked me, there was a lot of kind of questions about like what exactly the terrain looked like and what their options were and that sort of stuff. And I said, like, you can, nothing's stopping you from like going off-road at any point. And you can climb up, try to climb around, find a path through all these, this very rocky, mountainous terrain. And you could try to come around, like come on them from above or come around from behind or something like that. Or you could just avoid them and go the other way. And they decided to just avoid them. So they went off-road over mountain on the opposite side of the path. I had Calliope, the ranger, make like basically a navigation check. I think that's a point that it makes sense. Even with Shadowdark's more limited checks, I think that's a time that it makes sense to do one. Because it directly impacts like how long and difficult this journey is going to be. And I told them, like you should always set the stakes. I told them that if they did go off-road, it would take them longer to get back to Darlin Keep, which is where they had decided to head after losing their companion. They were like, yeah, we need to just go back and recoup. Yeah, so and they accepted that bargain. Calliope rolled well on her check. Actually, she rolled poorly, and then they used a luck token to make her roll well. So she navigated them overland back to the path, and I described they're re-entering like the road at the point where the Lost Citadel of the Scarlet Minotaur, where that adventure is located. And then this is also where the road branches to the south, which I had described as like infested with harpies. Now the rain had been going all through the early part of the day, and it let up as they were leaving the mountains, coming back to the road to this like sort of crossroads area here. And I described a rainbow arching across the sky, kind of like starting in the clouds, so like how you see it where it's not always like in the picture perfectly going up and down. A lot of times it like comes from the clouds in the sky, arches down to the ground. And I described it as arching down right over the path to the south, the harpy infested one. And I liked that. You should always tempt them. Like previously I hadn't given them any reason why they would go that way, which is sort of I should have. I like to just throw things out there and see like what they do with that information. I don't think you always have to have like, oh, here's a hard, fast reason for them to know this or for me to have this piece of flavor. But, it would have been better if I had given them something. And here was me trying to give them something like a reason to make the risk in the first place. But, they were like, no. Gabo for a second was like, oh, the leprechaun gold. But they pretty quickly were like, no, we can't do that. Like, since they've had 4 people for so long in their party, they feel like 3 people is like like I kind of assume that they feel like they need to get back up to 4 people to like do anything. And I think I would have to go straight up like above the table to break that assumption. Just tell them like, look, you guys are, you're level 3 now, about to be level 4. Like you don't need 4 people. Like 3 people is enough to. You're still, you're still a pretty strong party, like third, fourth level with 3 people. But that was definitely contributing to their not wanting to take risks. Now, because they had gone over land and lost some travel time, it took them more than a day to get back to the keep, so they had to camp outside again. And the weather, after raining earlier in the day and then clearing up, turns back to bad. I think I rolled a 1. I know I rolled at least one throughout the course of this. So it was terrible weather for the evening for their camping. Well, no. It was like decently bad weather for the night, and then when I rolled the overnight, like beginning of the next day check, that was a 1. So I described like they're woken up by just like a huge crack of thunder and lightning, and then like fat raindrops just immediately start. And then like within the span of like half an hour, it's just pouring rain. So they're woken up early. They were about a half a day from the keep already, so because it was a storm, doubled their travel time. So I described now it taking them the entire day of just like scrabbling through this mountain road. When they're going downhill, the whole path is just like a fucking stream of water pouring down. When they're going uphill, they're slipping on mud, having to scrabble up this drenched torrential path. And then they get back to the river crossing, which is just a ford. It's just like a low point in the river where it's shallow. So I hadn't even thought about this, but my buddy asked when we got back to the river, he was like, oh, so is it, like, what's the river look like? And I was like, in my head and out loud, I was like, oh, yeah, shit. You guys wouldn't be able to cross. Like, no way. It's been pouring rain. I think my second weather check that day was a 2. So it went from a 1 to a 2. And it had already been raining the day before. So it's been terrible weather. It's been pouring rain for, like, more than a day now. That river is, like, unpassable. So they ask about like making a raft and stuff like that, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, yeah, you can make a raft. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. But it was already dark, and it was like the end of the day. It's pouring rain, so they did their best to scrabble out a little hole to hide in, kind of like use some branches and sticks and whatnot to make themselves their little makeshift shelter, and just huddle up for the night. Weather clears the next morning. They spend all day next to the swollen river making a raft. Calliope, the ranger, getting advantage on her checks, which I think makes sense. Sort of directing the effort. I describe them as like they're a little more than halfway finished. Like she thinks she could finish it midway through the next day, later in the next day. I also say like, it's been a day of clear weather. The river's like, I imagine like in a ford type area that it like recovers fairly quickly. Like the water level lowers pretty quickly. I don't know actually. I have no idea. I could look that up. But from a gameplay and a plausibility standpoint, I'm like, yeah, I think it would just take like a couple days for it to become passable, like a day to 2. So I'm like, yeah, you could try it, but it would be dangerous. So they decided to just stay another night out there. They can, this whole time they can see the keep on the other side of the river, up the hill, up the pass a ways. And they're like, waving their hands at it, signaling for help. And I'm like, yeah, they're not coming to help you. So they stay there for the night. It does start raining again the next day, but just kind of like a drizzle. Oh, wait, no, it would have started raining, but Grits used his camping activity to predict, which is you get to make the GM re-roll a weather check. So he made me re-roll it, and he got a better result. So no more rain. So the water levels come down. They decide to finish their raft. So like about midway through the day, they finish the raft. They cross the river like a little downriver from like the ford where it's too shallow to cross with the raft. So they go down river a bit, cross with the raft so they can have it, drag it up, drag it far enough up so that if they see how much the river swells and where the bank reaches when it gets very bad, so they pull it up in the direction of the keep, getting it away from the river. They get back to the keep. Soldiers are all very curious, like you left with 4 and you're coming back with 3. They all want the story. And then the Castellan, of course, wants to, have dinner with them. Again, he wants, not only does he want information regarding the orcs and stuff, like his military side, but he's also, he likes him a good story. He likes some local lore. So he has them for dinner again. This was definitely like the role play section of the session, which is good because, up to now it had been, all like combat and travel and stuff. So, he's just plying them with questions, asking them all the things. Calliope was like very, she was quiet, silent, just like drinking copious amounts of wine. The players ask about like getting a 4th person, like if there's anyone here they can recruit. And again, because I kind of figured that they feel like they need 4 people. That I said like yeah, I described there were 2 swans here. I'm like one of the swans. I had the Castellan say I was like one of the swans might be willing to join you. Like the regular men at arms, like they can't. I mean nobody can technically, but the swans have a little more leeway. Like they're technically all nobility. They're all relatives of they're part of the house. Hardcore, the ruling house of Galena, so they get some more leeway. And then, frankly, they're the only ones who are tough enough that you'd even be interested in having them along anyway. So after dinner, Calliope kind of getting a little hostile towards the Castellan. We actually reread her character sheet and saw that she was neutral and not lawful. And I think kind of playing into that, I had her, kind of spit some venom at the Castellan saying, like, if you had any, like, gumption, you would march out and eliminate, like, this den of evil, this den of chaos, barely a day's march from this place, referring to the crab people, where they just lost their companion. And Gabo sort of like hustles her out before she can, embarrass herself. Gabo and Tamra go back to the, no, not Tamra, sorry. She's up there on the RIP board. Yeah, right above my finger there. That's my wife's drawing of her. So Gabo and Calliope go back to the barracks while Grit stays to help fill in the Castellan's map of the area. Because Grit's background is a scholar. And I think he's the only one of the 3 that would be capable of any level of like cartography. And they said they were going to compensate him for it. Because in this world, it is like a skill, it's a pretty rare skill to be able to like make maps. So I have to remember that he's owed some money. So they go back to the barracks. They talk to the 2 swans. I described one of them. I described him as being short in the military sense, meaning like he's almost done with his like term of duty. It's like mandatory military service. I said he's almost to his 35th name day. So once you turn 35, you're no longer, you're kind of out of like active duty. You know, you go into like the equivalent of the reserves or however you would want to phrase it. And he's kind of like an asshole. Like, you know, he's already kind of like a grump. And especially when he's coming up short on his the rest of his term, he's not going to join you. But the other guy I described as like he's a young, square jawed, like Superman, Clark Kent, like Henry Cavill looking guy, and he's just like comically. He's, you know, they are literally knights, so he is like your classic like paladin type. That was the archetype I had in mind for him. He's just like obnoxiously like pure hearted and just like, you know, he's like a jock kind of like, he's like the jock that you like don't want to like because everything just seems too perfect about them, but they're just like such a genuine like decent person that it's like, god damn it, I can't help but like you even though I want to not like you. That's what I'm aiming for. I don't know. I can't speak to how successfully I get there, but so yeah, he agrees to go, though he does throw in like, well, you know, I have a family to look after, so unfortunately I require compensation, unfortunately, for my family, you understand, that kind of thing. So he wants his share, like whatever he gets he keeps, equally distributed, which they were fine with. And then he throws in, well, I need 50 gold pieces, like just up front, you know, for the hazard to my family. And they're like, okay. And then he says, I need another 50 gold pieces, you know, to be paid upon my death to my family. And we'll need that placed here with the Castellan as a, you know, sort of security deposit. And he say, okay, geez. So they agree to all this. And he's like, great. We'll set off in the morning. So Calliope had just tossed herself down drunk. She was grumpy. She was sort of having a semi-existential crisis, you know, asking what are they doing out here? That sort of thing. She had just tossed herself down on the cot as soon as they had walked in there. So Gabo goes back. He goes to sleep. Gritz map, you know, does his map making until fairly late in the night, and then comes back. I guess when he got back, Gabo was still doing push-ups because, you know, Gabo was feeling a little, you know, he's the strong one, you know, Gabo's strong. So seeing this other guy all jacked up and all beefy and whatnot, this paladin type, I think got him, you know, like making sure he was wanted to feel like he was keeping his edge, you know. Wanted to make sure he stacked up in comparison. So he was doing push-ups when Gritz got back. Presumably he had been doing push-ups for quite a while. And that was where we ended that session, with the three of them going to bed in the barracks, and then in the morning they're going to get restocked, and their plan is to go back to the... they had talked about going to the Scarlet Minotaur Citadel, but they ended on, they want to go back and clear out this the Wavestone monolith with the crab people and the brain eater that they have yet to encounter. So that's going to be the plan for next session.